Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." A key role for every one of us as believers is to be a peacemaker, not only to be able to get along with other people, but to step into conflict, to step into dissension, and to get shot from both sides, and to bring peace where there is no peace. And we want to talk today about how you can be a peacemaker, looking at the story of Abigail. By the way, if you'd like to look into this a little deeper, I'd like to recommend the book Peacemaker by Ken Sande. This is the guy that churches call when they get into deep trouble. Did you know that churches sometimes get into deep trouble? Did you know that churches sometimes get crossways with one another? Did you know that there are sometimes churches that split? In fact, I would argue, I don't have any actual data on this, but I would argue that there have been more church plants in Southern Baptist life due to church splits than any other single factor. You might talk about that among your groups and see if you agree or disagree. We actually brought that up in my Bible study class this last week, and pretty much everybody there seemed to agree that it's a common thing that church people would get crossways with one another. And we desperately need to learn how to be peacemakers, as this passage teaches us. Now, this is somewhat of a long and unfamiliar passage, so I would encourage you to do what I would encourage you to do in many weeks, and that is to email your people and ask them, in this case, to read 1 Samuel 25, along with any notes they might have in their study Bible. I would encourage you to ask them to read it several times, read it 2 or 3 times. This is kind of an unfamiliar story to me, and somewhat of a complicated story, and so it did me good to be able to read it 2 or 3 times, and you would do well to get your people to read it 2 or 3 times before class. An informed person makes for an interesting discussion. An informed class makes for an interesting discussion. And if you can get your people to read this passage ahead of time, you'll be way ahead. But let me show you 4 principles that I see from this passage on how to be a peacemaker. The general story is David, and this is during the time of the year. I would ask your people about what year is this, and we would always remember that David is around the year, did you remember? 1000, Abraham around the year 2000, but David around the year 1000. His life straddles the year 1000. So we're looking at the life of David. We're around the year 1000, and this is before the era where he becomes king. He's been anointed. Saul is chasing him around the desert. Of course, our introduction to David came from the story of David and Goliath. He became very popular, and Saul became very jealous of him. And this is during that general era. And he runs across a guy named Nabal. And it's the Bible says that Nabal was a mean guy, and David got into conflict with him. Now, for the life of me, just by the way, it does look to me like David is overreacting here. David is a good man. He's a man after God's own heart, but he's not a perfect man, and it does look like he's overreaction. A verse says this: one of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he, Nabal, hurled insults at them." And best I can tell, that's all Nabal did. He hurled insults. He wasn't a very nice guy, but this doesn't look like, we're going to see in a moment, that David wants to kill him as a result. And it does look like David is kind of overreacting, but that's how sometimes people do. When they get in conflict with each other, sometimes they'll kind of overact. And we're going to look at a reason for that in a moment. But I would encourage you to read through the text and ask your people the question, what can we learn about how to fulfill Jesus' command to be peacemakers from this passage? And here are 4 principles that I found. The first thing that I find from Abigail's life is that she